Hey, hey, I need you to pay attention. Now consider this. Your favorite game developer is making a new game in your favorite genre. The game comes out and it's half-baked. Features are missing, it's littered with bugs, and shortly after release it's pulled from some platforms. How many copies do you buy? In January 2013, 13 years ago, CD Projekt Red released a teaser trailer for their next project, Cyberpunk 2077. Or really, I should say the project after their next project. The Witcher 3 was still 2 years from release, and CDPR thought it would be a good idea to put out a trailer for a game that wouldn't release for many, many years. But this trailer would eventually lead into other pre-release trailers and previews that would cultivate in one of gaming's biggest hype trains. And I was on board right from the start. I was a young babe of 17 at the time, but I had already grown a deep appreciation for the genre of cyberpunk. And this concept trailer promised a game that would perfectly scratch the itch I had for a big budget action game with a cyberpunk setting. I mean, it's in the title. How much more clear could they make it? So along with everyone else, I waited impatiently for the better part of a decade, gobbling up any media or press releases with new details about the game, or God willing, any morsel of information about when it might actually come out. Eventually, the marketing entered full swing as the game got closer to release, and I started to be a little more conservative with what I watched from the game, but what I watched was still intriguing me, and I remained tremendously excited for the potential of the game. I was a little disappointed about it being a first-person game, as I'm typically a third-person action guy, and I find customizing a character you can't see to be a little redundant, but regardless, the game finally hit store shelves in December of 2020. It quickly became apparent that this thing needed more time in the oven. And also, that no matter how long you cooked it, it wasn't going to come out the way it was supposed to on last-gen consoles. I played the game on PS4. PS5s were crazy hard to come by at the time, and I had not yet dived into the realm of PC gaming, and on PS4 it was messy. Performance issues and strange bugs aside, it just didn't look visually appealing thanks to all the concessions they had to make just to get the game running on older hardware. And that was one of the biggest draws for me, being able to explore and get lost in the visual splendor of a cyberpunk setting. And when there's all this ghosting and general blurriness, that kinda gets lost. And I didn't find the gameplay all that compelling either. I had decided to study the blade, as it were, and I just kept feeling like I was fumbling through the combat and just barely scraping by. The game actually felt weirdly difficult at times. Maybe it's a skill issue, but I just wasn't having a good time. It didn't help that I rarely felt compelled to invest the skill points I'd earned, as the leveling system on release was less than inspiring. I couldn't get very deep into the hacking, and the stealth system also wasn't gripping me. Then there were extra gameplay modes like the braindance investigations. An interesting concept, but I was profoundly bored by the execution. It's just not fun. When I replayed the game on PC with a keyboard, it literally felt like I was doing some monotonous editing work. But there was a bigger problem. A problem that still kinda persists to this day. The game was boring. Well, maybe boring is a strong word, but I found the narrative and the characters to be not all that interesting. So when I played on PS4, I didn't get very far past the Konpeki Plaza heist before dropping the game. Back in 2015, when I first tried to play The Witcher 3, I had a similar problem. I played for an hour or two after getting to Velen, but the game just wasn't clicking for me, so I put it down. A friend of mine insisted that I should give it another go. Sure enough, after a couple hours, I got hooked by the characters and the quests and exploring the world that CDPR had brought to life. And now The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. So I kept hoping the same thing would happen with Cyberpunk. I would look at forums online to see what people thought of the main campaign, and I had seen some people suggest that the side quests were stronger than the critical path, so I tried doing some side missions as well, but over 2 or 3 years I repeatedly tried and failed to actually play all the way through this game. Finally, last year I decided to push through this thing. Partly to do some work on another video, but partly because the Phantom Liberty expansion had come out, along with major updates to the base game, and I had seen some people saying pretty positive things about it. So once I heard that CDPR had put out the last ever major update for the game, I started from scratch with a new character, played through the base game, then hopped into the expansion afterward. I'm gonna discuss the two separately, and it'll be pretty obvious why, but for now, let's talk about the base game of Cyberpunk 2077. Along with the visual spectacle, one of the things I love most about Cyberpunk as a genre is the tendency to pontificate on the nature of humanity. It's why I love things like Ghost in the Shell or Blade Runner 2049 or Upgrade. This is another area in which Cyberpunk 2077 felt severely lacking. Let's take a look at the first trailer. We see a close-up of a woman's face, and then we're shown a bullet traveling toward her face in slow motion, eventually making contact and shattering on impact, leaving her completely unscarred. Already, within the first few seconds, this builds the intrigue. Why is this woman unaffected by bullets? Is she human? Is this some kind of synthetic entity? Maybe she is human, but she's been modified to have an ultra-resilient shell or something. After a few more seconds, you see that some kind of police force is actually firing a hail of bullets at this woman, and that she has blades protruding from her arms. She's covered in blood and surrounded by bodies. And based on her attire, we're led to believe she's maybe a dancer or an escort or something like that. Aside from wondering why the police are firing hundreds of seemingly ineffective bullets at this woman, there are just so many implications for the nature of this society and questions planted in your brain just from this little teaser. And I was really hoping the game would capitalize on the philosophical and societal potential of the cyberpunk setting. But ultimately, I think CDPR really dropped the ball here, and unfortunately this isn't a problem that can be patched out. 2077 to me plays out like a Grand Theft Auto style game that takes place in the future. A more mature version of Grand Theft Auto, mind you. I went back to try and play GTA 5 recently, and it is a lot more crass and spiteful than I remembered. Anyway, there are unfortunately only little kernels of intrigue here when it comes to utilizing the game's setting. The main progression is pretty open-ended, but when I first played the game, I ended up doing the Voodoo Boys questline pretty early on, and this is perhaps some of the most cyberpunk-y stuff in the game, at least for a good while. This questline eventually sees you diving into this ethereal cyberspace where you talk to this weird, almost omniscient entity that is inhabiting the form of one of Johnny Silverhand's old flames. When I finally decided to play through this thing to the end, I was really hoping for more stuff in this vein. This eerie, almost frightening atmosphere, these scenarios that prompt questions and deep thought about the human experience and what technology can do to help or harm it. And it seems like the basic premise would really prime the game to serve up plenty of these kinds of questions. The main character has another human inhabiting their brain, and it's beyond hallucination. It seems like this character is really there, as much as he possibly can be without other people actually seeing or hearing him. That's kinda crazy, right? But after a day or two of wrestling with this sudden life change, it's clear the game wants to treat Johnny's presence less as an opportunity to explore any deep questions and more as an obstacle that sometimes will also act as dry comic relief. In general, the game will sometimes flirt with the ideas and concepts that make the cyberpunk genre great, but most of the time it just feels like set dressing. The game's more concerned with the inconvenience posed by Johnny's presence and going on criminal escapades with a cast of largely uncompelling accomplices and fixers. I very rarely felt the same level of intrigue when doing side missions in this game as I did in The Witcher 3. That game was chock full of quests that managed to hold my attention even now after half a dozen playthroughs. Okay, unpopular opinions incoming, but I found Judy to be pretty flat as a character, and I was outright annoyed by Pan Am. I wasn't impressed with Judy's side quests, and I didn't even bother doing anything with Pan Am beyond what was required for the main plot. I will give them props for putting some effort into the side missions. From what I've seen, though I didn't go out of my way to do a ton of them, it seems like most of the side missions actually had some good meat on their bones. We're not talking about someone telling you to go kill 5 rats. Fixer jobs are pretty straightforward, but I consider those to be in a separate category. The side missions are fairly fleshed out, but I just found very few of them to actually be compelling. The only side missions I can remember that genuinely intrigued me were the ones associated with River Ward. I was curious about the romance angle in this game, and River seemed like the most interesting choice at a glance. So I delved into his questline, and it led to a pretty interesting investigation and manhunt for a twisted serial killer. And I don't want to dwell on this one questline, but it had a lot going for it. The sleuthing, the personal investment and stakes for River, made more interesting by my decision to pursue him romantically, the slow revealing of the killer's practices and backstory. It was just a really focused and thrilling series of missions, and I wish there were more side missions that pulled me in like these did. Even the main campaign rarely got me this invested, if ever. It still baffles me that CD Projekt made the decision to kill off their most interesting character in the opening act of the game. They clearly put a lot of effort into making Jackie an endearing character with a deep connection to V, even if that connection is a little clunky depending on your starting path. For any of the nitpicks I can make about Jackie, he is easily the most compelling character in the game to me. And once he dies in Konpeki, it's almost like he never existed. There's an optional wake attendance, and you can apparently leave him a voicemail on occasion if you remember to, but beyond that, I can barely remember him even being referenced. And I guess this would be fine if CDPR gave us some other compelling characters in his place, but I don't think they really succeeded with that. The rest of the game is filled with the likes of Judy, Panam, Takamura, Rogue, and of course, Johnny Silverhand. There was a big to-do about having Keanu Reeves in the game.
You're breathtaking!
But ultimately, I was pretty underwhelmed by Johnny. Or maybe just whelmed. It was just hard to get a read on what his relationship was with V. Part of the problem is that the game's structure is so freeform, it's nearly impossible to have a clean narrative arc for Johnny since he's always there, even during a number of side missions. But another problem is that he's just a punk. A cyberpunk, if you will.
Say that again?
He's really brash and abrasive. Even being made to play as him in certain sequences throughout the game, I basically never connected with or related to Johnny. He's just so anti-authority and anti-establishment that I found him obnoxious. Even in moments when he and V were having a heart-to-heart, he would find a way to sour the mood and paint blame on anyone but himself. I like flawed characters, but they need to have, like, one redeeming quality, at least. He's not particularly charismatic. He's selfish, he's rude, and he's always got something to say. Sometimes it's inoffensive, but that's about the best I can say about Johnny. And the other secondary characters just didn't do it for me either. Takamura's probably the most prominent one in the main plot, and he's just fine. They make really small efforts to characterize him, but it's just not enough. Most everyone else feels like they're just there to fill out the scene, or fill out a role that's needed to move things forward. Some characters are decent, but rarely anything more. The production value is definitely there, no question, but the script and the characters are just lackluster overall, in my opinion. But then, in the 11th hour, or this game is longer than that, let's say in the 30th hour, the game actually starts to get interesting. Potentially. As you probably know, there are multiple endings to this game, and I think the one that I got is one of the least common for people to get, but I found it to be the most interesting part of the base game by far. If you strike a deal with Hanako Arasaka, she will arrange for a medical procedure that could potentially remove the engram from V's brain without flatlining them. It's a moonshot in more ways than one because no one can provide any guarantees, and you actually have to go to a facility in orbit to get the procedure. I was kind of floored by the execution of this ending. I figured this would be a short to medium length cutscene that wrapped up the game and that it would be pretty straightforward. But what followed was a tense isolation drama that saw V enduring an undisclosed amount of time partaking in these brutally repetitive physical and mental exams while being trapped in a single, lifeless room with no human contact outside of the one person administering these tests and a monitor that plays news clips sometimes. During all this time, you have all these questions. Is V still going to be the same person? Will they ever get to leave this room? Will they even live long enough to be able to leave this room? Does anyone in this facility even care? What the hell is with these tests? How much of this is real? Finally, after an agonizingly long stay in what feels like a prison, Anders Hellman pays you a visit and offers you a choice. Die in 6 months, as the surgery only afforded you that much time, or allow Arasaka to make and legally own an engram of you to maybe be put into a body at a later time. Maybe it's not the hardest choice for some people, but it did feel kind of satisfying to say fuck you and live the last few months of life on your own terms, without Keanu making a fuss all the time. This ending had a lot going for it, finally facing down some real cyberpunk quandaries, introducing some good tension, playing with perception, and generally just having some good narrative weight to it. I genuinely enjoyed this sequence, but it took way too long to get this good. As the credits rolled, I was in disbelief at how much of a jump this ending made from the passing quality of the rest of the game. The rest was satisfactory. It got the job done, and I had just really been hoping for more than that. But with the ending being as good as it was, I decided it would be worth it to give Phantom Liberty a try. And it immediately kicked ass. From the very first introduction to Songbird, I felt a distinct shift in the game's presentation. I was experiencing surprise and intrigue and genuine excitement all within the first hour of starting this DLC. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like Phantom Liberty is an entirely different beast from the base game. It's more like they just dialed Cyberpunk up one extra notch, at least for my taste. The scenario, the characters, and even some of the environments all just compelled me more in this expansion than they did in the main game. Everything felt more focused, and there was more momentum to the main plotline. This is probably partly due to it being a DLC, but it also helps that CDPR didn't have to spend as much time panicking and putting out fires while developing it. At least, that's my assumption. I really enjoyed interacting with characters like Reed and Songbird. Other characters I thought were just alright, but it at least felt like there was a more stable cast, again due to the tighter focus. And it felt like CDPR were able to craft some of the scenarios better as well. There were some really high-octane, exciting moments like rescuing the president from the crashed airplane, fighting against the Chimera, and the final climactic encounter in Songbird's ending. Granted, I think the endings can play out a few different ways depending on your choices, but I've reached the ending twice, and both the endings I saw were radically different, but both really gripping and exciting, which is no easy feat. They also introduced some new tech in this DLC that allows you to fully impersonate someone, and this is used to have a kind of dialogue-based encounter with the main baddie, Hansen. I think the concept alone did a lot of legwork here, as the execution was a little muddy for me, but overall I give it an A for effort. But these are all the highlights. There are some parts of this expansion that would slot in pretty cleanly with the stuff from the base game that didn't impress me, some stuff that's just decent, and there are some narrative things that didn't really land for me, namely the relationship between Reed and Songbird. I kinda had a hard time following their reasons for being diametrically opposed to one another, and when I would have to make one of these big choices, I would often think, do I really need to make such a strong, unwavering choice here? I feel like these two could just have a conversation and come to some kind of compromise. I really felt this near the end when I literally was presented with the choices betray Reed or betray Songbird. But these moments were buoyed by the rest just being really enjoyable. Beyond the narrative stuff, I also found myself enjoying the gameplay here too. Part of it was due to the fact that I was finally able to get into the more advanced quick hacks, and I had become some kind of blade-wielding demon, zipping around the place, cutting dudes up, performing finishers, and making people blow their own brains out. It felt pretty great at times. Of course, it's also partly due to the scenarios I was being put in being more exciting. There wasn't much new stuff in the DLC to make combat more exciting for my setup, unfortunately. I think I got some moderate use out of one upgrade from the new skill tree, and that's about it. Finally, and I'm amazed I haven't mentioned this already, but this game is gorgeous. I've been fortunate enough to play this thing on a pretty high-end PC, and the path tracing really just allows the already great visuals of Night City to come to life in an amazing way. One of my favorite things to do in this game is just hop on my bike and drive around, taking in the amazing visuals and atmosphere of this expansive and greatly detailed city that CD Projekt Red have lovingly crafted. If there's one area where they unquestionably succeeded, it's Night City's vibe. So it's worth the admission price for that alone for me. It's been hard to know when is a good time to talk about this game, given that it's had to evolve bit by bit over time and there's always been a little bit more to add or change, but it seems like now, maybe, the game is as feature complete as it's gonna get. As it is, it's a solid and enjoyable experience with some really strong aspects and some pretty weak ones. My disappointment with it really stems from its potential. I think if this game had a stronger narrative and characters, it could easily be in my top 5 of all time. All the other pieces are in place. They got so close, but you know what? Making games is hard. Making a good game is exceedingly hard, and making a great game is nearly impossible. So while I wish things had turned out differently, I understand that there were probably just some unfortunate circumstances that led to the game being how it is, both at launch and as it is today. But as I said, I'm optimistic about what they can do with the sequel, even if I am wary of the switch to Unreal Engine for all future games. In the meantime, I also look forward to The Witcher 4. I still believe in CDPR, even with the unfortunate initial release of this game. So what are your thoughts about Cyberpunk? I'm sure some of you are strongly disagreeing with me on some of these points already. Regardless, I hope the video was enjoyable. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe to see more. If you really like it, tell a friend. That's really helpful for me. And if you somehow have extra cash burning a hole in your pocket, you can check out my Patreon or become a channel member. Best of luck to you, and I'll catch you in the next one.